The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the towering windows of O'Hare International Airport's Gate B-17, gilding the polished floor in golden hues as passengers gathered for the final boarding call of Flight 2834 to San Francisco. Amelia Martin straightened her navy blue uniform, her fingertips grazing the silver wings on her lapel, a badge of honor, one she had earned just 6 months prior. At only 24, she was one of the youngest flight attendants on the Chicago-based crew, and she took pride in upholding Skyline Airways' high standards. First class gleamed with freshly polished leather seats and sleek LED lights designed to evoke a sense of luxury and calm. Amelia watched as passengers trickled into the cabin, matching faces to seat numbers with quick efficiency. An older man in a tailored suit settled into seat 2A, putting on his noise-canceling headphones with a practiced ease. Nearby, a couple in their 50s whispered softly to each other as they arranged their belongings, their wedding bands glinting in the light. Then Ayanna Williams appeared at the cabin entrance. Amelia's breath caught for a moment. The woman moved with an effortless grace, her charcoal gray pantsuit elegantly tailored to her tall frame. Her braids were gathered in a stylish updo, and a delicate gold necklace rested against her collarbone, catching the light with every step. She carried a designer laptop bag and a small, polished carry-on that likely cost more than Amelia's monthly rent. As Ayanna approached row 2, she checked her boarding pass briefly before sliding into seat 2C with a quiet confidence. Her fingers glided over her laptop as she opened it, diving into what looked like a detailed presentation, her brow furrowing in concentration. Amelia couldn't shake a feeling of unease as she glanced over at Ayanna. Though she was clearly poised and professional, something about her presence didn't fit the first-class regulars Amelia had grown accustomed to. There was an unspoken rhythm to this section, usually populated by business executives and seasoned travelers who wore their wealth as comfortably as a second skin. But Ayanna, despite her obvious sophistication, seemed like an unexpected guest in their midst. As more passengers boarded, Amelia found her attention drifting back to Ayanna, her instincts prickling. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to upgrade themselves, sliding into an empty first-class seat as if it were a casual decision. After all, she thought, she was responsible for ensuring everyone was in their proper place. Taking a steadying breath, Amelia approached row 2. She fixed on her most professional smile, the one she had perfected during training to appear both warm and authoritative. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said softly, leaning in to avoid drawing the attention of nearby passengers. "I just wanted to verify your seat assignment. Sometimes the system can be a bit confusing, and we wouldn't want you settling into the wrong section." Ayanna looked up, her dark eyes meeting Amelia's with a calm, steady gaze. There was no hint of surprise or discomfort in her expression, just a quiet certainty that spoke of someone well accustomed to these encounters. Without breaking her composure, she reached into her bag and pulled out her boarding pass, offering it with a grace that made Amelia's cheeks warm under the directness of her gaze. Amelia glanced down, her pulse quickening. The ticket in her hand was indisputable, first class. Seat 2C, exactly where Ayanna sat, but still, something tugged at her, a nagging voice from her training telling her to trust her instincts. "I see," Amelia replied, but didn't quite return the boarding pass. "It's just, we've had a few issues with our booking system lately. Would you mind if I double-check this against the manifest?" Ayanna's expression remained unchanged, but a flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes, a weariness tempered with resolve. "Of course," she replied smoothly, her tone polite but with an edge of steel. "Though I can't recall seeing any other passengers asked to verify their seating assignments quite so thoroughly." Her words hung in the air, a subtle challenge wrapped in perfect politeness. Several passengers nearby had begun to notice, their conversations dropping to whispers, curious eyes shifting toward the scene unfolding in row 2. Amelia felt her professional mask slip just slightly, her determination to maintain control clashing with a growing uncertainty. "It's just procedure," she insisted, but her voice wavered, betraying her discomfort. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our main cabin while I sort this out. We have some excellent seats available." Ayanna's eyes flashed, her calm expression unwavering. "I'm quite comfortable here, thank you." As my boarding pass clearly indicates. This is my assigned seat. Unless you have a specific reason to believe otherwise. I intend to stay exactly where I am. The tension in the cabin thickened. Like a cord stretched tight. Across the aisle, a businessman had removed his earbuds. His phone now forgotten as he openly watched the interaction. Amelia became acutely aware of every eye on her. Of the subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere from pre-flight bustle to something more uncomfortable. Something charged. With her heart pounding, Amelia tried once more. Ma'am, I'm sure we can sort this out quickly if you'll just. Ayanna closed her laptop with a decisive click. Her gaze piercing. I've shown you my boarding pass. Confirmed my seat assignment. Now, unless you have a valid reason to continue this conversation, I believe there are other passengers who require your attention. The words were gentle but left no room for argument. A dismissal that stung like a slap. For a moment, Amelia stood frozen, caught between pride and the realization that she might have made a mistake. But before she could gather herself, another passenger's request for assistance pulled her away, leaving her retreating down the aisle with a hollow sense of defeat. As she moved mechanically through her tasks, directing bags and stowing carry-ons, Amelia's mind kept circling back to Ayanna, to the woman's poise and unshakable confidence. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd crossed a line, that her attempt to assert authority had revealed something deeper, something unsettling. The rest of first class continued boarding, but an uneasy quiet lingered. Conversations were hushed, every interaction colored by the earlier exchange. And though Ayanna had reopened her laptop and resumed her work, the subtle tension in her shoulders spoke volumes. It was only the beginning of a flight that would be anything but ordinary. The cabin door closed with a soft thud, sealing in the buzzing energy of a full flight settling into motion. Amelia adjusted her posture, nerves still tingling from the encounter with Ayanna in row 2. She moved through the first-class cabin, double-checking overhead bins, her mind replaying the earlier exchange on a loop. She glanced over at Ayanna again. The woman was absorbed in her laptop, eyes focused on a screen filled with graphs and bullet points. Yet even in her calm, a barely visible tension seemed to ripple in her shoulders, like a taut line ready to snap. Amelia's unease grew. She felt a strange conviction and intuition honed over months of training and observation. It gnawed at her, telling her there was something wrong, something she couldn't quite articulate. She could practically hear her instructor's voice in her head. Always trust your instincts, Amelia. They'll guide you when you're not sure. Fighting the nervous flutter in her stomach, she turned and caught sight of Sarah Moore, the senior flight attendant, organizing the galley up ahead. Sarah was a veteran with over 20 years of experience, someone Amelia respected deeply. Steeling herself, Amelia approached her, lowering her voice so the conversation wouldn't carry. Sarah, she murmured, her voice edged with anxiety. I think we might have a situation in first class. Sarah looked up, raising a single eyebrow. A situation? Her tone was calm, a reminder of the confidence that came with years of navigating turbulence, both in the air and among passengers. It's the woman in 2C. Amelia whispered. She showed me her boarding pass. But something feels off. I can't shake the feeling she's in the wrong seat. She doesn't fit the usual first-class profile. And when I asked her to verify, she got defensive. Sarah studied Amelia's face for a moment, then nodded. Let me take a look. Amelia felt a mix of relief and apprehension as Sarah moved down the aisle, her calm authority cutting through the murmur of first-class passengers settling into their seats. Amelia followed, watching as Sarah approached Ayanna with a practiced, professional smile. Good evening, ma'am, Sarah began, her voice a model of courtesy, laced with the weight of experience. I understand there may have been some confusion about your seat assignment. Would you mind showing me your boarding pass once more? Ayanna looked up, her eyes meeting Sarah's with a patience that seemed as unbreakable as iron. With a steady hand, she held out her boarding pass, her expression calm but edged with something sharper, a quiet defiance. Sarah examined the ticket, confirming what Amelia had already seen. First class, seat 2C, no mistake. But as she handed the pass back, Ayanna's voice, smooth and composed, cut through the quiet. If I may ask, Ayanna said, Is there any particular reason why I'm the only one being asked to repeatedly verify my seat? I don't recall seeing other passengers receiving quite this level of scrutiny. Sarah blinked, the subtle question slicing through her practiced professionalism. Around them, the cabin had gone noticeably quieter. Passengers shifting in their seats, no longer pretending not to notice the exchange. Some looked away, as if avoiding an awkward scene. Others watched with open curiosity, their gazes sharp and attentive. It's just standard procedure, ma'am, Sarah replied, but she could feel the flaw in her words. The gap between what was protocol and what was happening in this moment. We've had instances of seat confusion recently, and it's our job to ensure everyone is where they need to be. Ayana's gaze hardened, though her voice remained level. Is that so? She asked. Interesting. I fly this route frequently, and I've never seen standard procedure applied this way with other first-class passengers. Perhaps you could explain the selection criteria. Her words hung heavy in the air, drawing a line that was both polite and piercing. Amelia's cheeks flushed as she felt the subtle accusation, the suggestion of something far deeper than a mere misunderstanding. Sarah's gaze flickered over the other passengers, aware of their close attention. The businessman in 2A had removed his earbuds, pretending to check his phone but clearly listening in. A couple across the aisle exchanged uncomfortable glances, and a few rows down, a younger man's eyes darted from Ayana to Sarah with barely concealed interest. As Sarah shifted, preparing a response, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the cabin. Is there a problem here? Amelia turned, her heart lurching as she took in the figure standing in the last row of first class. The man wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, his posture radiating a quiet authority. His gaze was directed at Sarah and Amelia, though his focus lingered on Ayana with a familiar warmth. For a split second, no one spoke. Then Sarah cleared her throat. Oh, not at all, sir. We're simply verifying seat assignments. This passenger. The man's expression remained unreadable as he stepped forward, and without breaking his gaze, he extended his hand to Ayana with a subtle smile. Ayana, I'm sorry for the delay. The board meeting ran longer than expected. Amelia's stomach twisted as realization dawned. Ayana stood, returning the man's smile with a familiarity that spoke of years, of shared spaces and confidences. When she spoke, her tone was calm, but there was an unmistakable strength in her words. Michael, it's good to see you. She turned to her laptop, shutting it with a decisive click. I was just catching up on the quarterly projections you sent over. The quiet exchange between them felt like the closing of a curtain. A silent revelation that left Amelia and Sarah in stunned silence. The man Michael met their gazes with a directness that was both polite and unyielding. Allow me to introduce myself, he said evenly. I'm Michael Lee, CEO of Skyline Airways. He gestured to Ayana, his voice carrying a hint of pride. And Ayana here is head of corporate strategy. She's been instrumental in our recent expansion efforts. The words dropped like stones into a pond, rippling through the first-class cabin with undeniable weight. Amelia's mind raced as she connected the dots, a flush of embarrassment rising to her cheeks. She saw the expressions of the nearby passengers shift, their curiosity melting into astonishment. Sarah managed a tight smile. Mr. Lee, Ms. Williams, we apologize for any inconvenience. We weren't aware. Michael's gaze remained steady, his tone pleasant but laced with something hard. Indeed, sometimes, we learn more by observing directly. He held her gaze a moment longer before turning back to Ayana. A silent affirmation of her place and authority. For Amelia, the full impact of her actions came crashing down. She stood frozen, watching as Michael and Ayana exchanged quiet words about their upcoming meeting. The realization settled in her chest like a weight. She had allowed her assumptions to overtake her judgment, casting doubt where there should have been none. In the dimmed lighting of the cabin, the air felt thicker, charged with an unspoken understanding. Amelia caught Sarah's eye, seeing a flicker of something she hadn't expected in her mentor's expression, an acknowledgement of the lines they'd crossed, and a reminder that some lessons came harder than others. Amelia felt a sting of shame but forced herself to stand tall, determined to face the consequences of her assumptions. The hum of the engines settled into a steady rhythm as Flight 2834 climbed to cruising altitude. The Chicago skyline fading behind them in the deepening twilight. In the first-class cabin, the usual rhythm of pre-flight had shifted, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable quiet that seemed to cling to every interaction. Amelia moved through her duties mechanically, but her mind buzzed with tension. She stole a glance at Ayanna and Michael in row 2. They had leaned close together, speaking in low voices, their expressions calm, almost serene. Watching them, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that they existed in a world that she had unwittingly and uncomfortably intruded upon. She swallowed, her cheeks warm as the memory of her earlier insistence flashed through her mind. Michael Lee was still in his charcoal suit, but now, with the easy authority of a man accustomed to command, his quiet presence filled the space around him. Every so often, he would look up, his eyes scanning the cabin as if taking inventory, his gaze lingering on her with a faint but unmistakable edge. The realization that she had questioned Ayanna, who was not only the airline's head of corporate strategy but also Michael Lee's wife, felt like a weight pressing down on her. She had tried to assert her authority and, in doing so, had inadvertently tested one of the most influential people in the company. In the galley, Sarah approached her, a quiet tension in her movements. She handed Amelia a tray of drinks to distribute, her voice low as she murmured, "Keep your composure, we still have a job to do." Amelia nodded, grateful for the structure of routine even as her hands shook slightly. She forced herself to walk steadily down the aisle, delivering drinks and taking requests. But the cabin had changed. Passengers watched her with careful eyes, their expressions a blend of curiosity and something sharper, something she couldn't quite place. In row 1, an older woman with a silver bob shot her a look that could only be described as disapproving. As she neared row 2, Amelia's heart beat faster. She stopped beside Ayanna and Michael, offering a quiet, "Would you like anything to drink?" Ayanna glanced up, her expression neutral. "Sparkling water with lime, please." Michael nodded, his voice soft but firm. "The same for me." Their words were polite, but Amelia could feel the weight of the exchange. As she handed over their drinks, Ayanna's fingers brushed hers for the briefest moment, a touch so slight it could have been accidental, but one that felt charged with unspoken meaning. She met Ayanna's gaze, expecting anger or judgment, but instead found something far more piercing: calm, unshakable dignity. Back in the galley, Amelia set the empty tray down, her mind spinning. She could feel Sarah watching her, the senior flight attendant's face unreadable. Amelia's hand rested on the edge of the counter, fingers drumming as her thoughts turned inward, replaying every choice, every assumption. A voice broke her out of her trance. "Excuse me, miss?" The man in seat 2A, who had been watching since the earlier exchange, was standing in the aisle, holding his glass. "If it's not too much trouble, could I have a refill?" "Of course," Amelia replied, slipping back into her professional tone as she took his glass. But as she turned to pour the drink, she overheard a fragment of conversation coming from row 2. Ayanna's voice steady and unflinching. "What concerns me," Ayanna was saying quietly to Michael, "isn't the initial questioning. I understand protocols. What I find troubling is the escalation, the resistance to evidence." Michael's voice responded, measured but edged with understanding. "Exactly. When assumptions go unchallenged, they become patterns." The businessman in 2A took his glass, his eyes meeting Amelia's for a moment that seemed to stretch uncomfortably. "Thank you," he murmured, but his look lingered, heavy with implication before he returned to his seat. Amelia took a slow breath, the implications of Ayanna's words pressing on her. The casual authority, the way Ayanna spoke with Michael as if this incident had sparked a ongoing discussion between them, it all reinforced a fact she could no longer ignore. She had allowed her instincts to be guided by biases she hadn't even known she possessed. As the plane sailed over the Rockies, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the cabin in a dim, golden glow. Amelia watched the shifting shadows, feeling a transformation stir within her, slow but undeniable. The life of a flight attendant was built on perception, knowing how to assess people quickly, to read them from a glance. But today, She had learned just how easily those perceptions could be clouded. Sarah stepped into the galley beside her. Her voice barely above a whisper. Take this as a lesson. Amelia, we all have moments that force us to confront ourselves. It's what you do next that matters. Amelia looked at her, a mixture of regret and gratitude swelling in her chest. Thank you, Sarah. I feel like I failed. Sarah shook her head. Failure isn't the right word. It's growth, Amelia, and it's rarely comfortable. With that, Sarah moved back to her duties, leaving Amelia alone to reflect on her words. As the plane cruised through the night sky, Amelia glanced back at Ayanna and Michael. Their conversation had resumed, quiet but deliberate, and Amelia couldn't help but think that she had inadvertently been part of a lesson much larger than herself. The quiet tension from the first-class cabin had rippled through the plane, settling in Amelia's chest like a stone. She took a slow breath, steeling herself as she moved through her routine, every action feeling heavy with self-awareness. Each polite exchange with a passenger, each offer of water or wine, felt laden with the memory of her earlier mistake. In the dimmed light, Ayanna and Michael seemed entirely at ease, their heads close together as they discussed something on Ayanna's laptop. Every so often, Michael's gaze would sweep the cabin, resting momentarily on Amelia with a look she couldn't quite decipher, something between disappointment and expectation. Finally, as Amelia finished the drink service, Michael caught her eye. With a subtle gesture, he motioned for her to come over. Her pulse quickened, but she willed herself to stay composed, standing tall as she approached. Amelia, would you mind joining us for a moment? Michael's tone was calm but unmistakably firm, his voice carrying a quiet authority that left no room for question. He gestured to the seat across from him, where a passenger had momentarily stepped away. She sank into the seat across from Michael and Ayanna, feeling as if the entire cabin had shrunk to just this small space. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers fidgeting as she glanced from Michael to Ayanna. A few nearby passengers glanced over, trying to watch without appearing obvious, their curiosity a silent hum in the background. Michael leaned forward, his gaze steady. Amelia, I want to talk about what happened during boarding. He began, his voice gentle yet unyielding. Could you walk me through your thought process when you first approached Ayanna? The question hung in the air, direct but not accusatory. Amelia felt her cheeks flush, every word she'd said to Ayanna echoing in her mind with a new, painful clarity. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully, struggling to piece together her thoughts as she examined them with fresh eyes. I saw Ms. Williams, she started, glancing at Ayanna, who met her gaze with a calm, unwavering expression, and something just didn't feel right. I thought it was instinct. But, now I can see that I made assumptions. I allowed my bias to influence me without even realizing it. Ayanna's lips pressed into a thin line, her expression revealing nothing, yet Amelia felt as if the weight of Ayanna's silence alone spoke volumes. Bias, Ayanna said quietly, finishing the thought Amelia couldn't quite voice. Unconscious, perhaps, but bias all the same. Her words held a quiet power, not angry or confrontational, but with an undeniable authority that made Amelia feel both vulnerable and strangely grateful. The quiet honesty in her words felt like a balm to Amelia's raw nerves. Yet each one struck deeply, challenging her to look inward with a clarity she had never quite reached before. Yes, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I kept questioning you, even after you showed me your boarding pass. I couldn't let go of my initial impression. I kept looking for ways to prove I was right, instead of considering that I might be wrong. Michael nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful, as if he were watching a process unfold before him. Awareness is a good start. Amelia, he said, his tone encouraging yet firm. But Ayanna's experience today wasn't just an inconvenience. These assumptions, these biases, have real impact. Ayanna straightened slightly, the faintest hint of frustration flickering in her eyes. What struck me the most wasn't the initial questioning, though that's sadly common enough, she said, her tone measured, each word chosen with precision. It was the escalation, the refusal to accept the evidence right in front of you, the suggestion that I should move to coach, even after verifying my seat. Amelia felt the weight of each word, each pointed observation settling like stones in her chest. She swallowed, her mouth dry, struggling to find a response that could express the depth of her regret. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Williams," she managed, her voice catching slightly, "not just for how I acted, but for putting you in a position where you had to explain yourself in the first place. I should have questioned my own judgment." Ayanna held her gaze, her expression softening just a fraction. "I appreciate your apology," she replied, her tone gentle but resolute. "But this isn't just about what happened between us. It's about recognizing the ripple effect these biases have, the way they shape how people are seen and treated, even in subtle ways." A voice from the overhead speakers interrupted, announcing turbulence ahead, and a slight jolt ran through the cabin. Michael waited for the plane to steady before speaking, his gaze still fixed on Amelia. "One reason I didn't intervene earlier," he said, "was to see how you would handle this situation on your own. Not to test you, but to understand what our passengers might experience when faced with subtle, or not so subtle, bias." Amelia looked down, the full impact of his words pressing on her. The knowledge that her actions had inadvertently provided him insight into an issue she hadn't been fully aware of until now felt both humbling and uncomfortable. She glanced at Ayanna, seeing not just a passenger but a person who had borne the weight of countless similar assumptions and, in the process, had to teach lessons no one should have to teach. "I want to do better," Amelia said, her voice steadying with the force of her resolve. "Not just in words but in action. I need to question my instincts, to understand where they come from and whether they're truly fair." Ayanna's expression softened, her gaze thoughtful. "That awareness is the beginning. It's what you choose to do with it that will make a difference. For you and for others." Around them, the plane hummed with a quiet familiarity. But in this small circle, it felt as if the world had shifted. Amelia looked at Ayanna, feeling something transform within her, a commitment to change, to confront not only her own biases but the systems that allowed them to go unchallenged. As she returned to her duties, Amelia moved through the cabin with a new clarity. Each interaction felt like an opportunity, a chance to unlearn her assumptions and rebuild her instincts from a place of empathy and understanding. The shadows of her earlier mistakes still lingered, but with each step, she felt herself growing, reshaping the way she saw the world and her place within it. And though the journey toward true awareness had only just begun, she knew, with unwavering certainty, that she was ready to walk that path. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane soared over the Midwest, casting a warm glow over first class. Outside, the sky was ink black, with pinpoints of stars piercing through the night. Inside, the cabin was filled with the muted hum of voices and the soft rustling of magazines. But for Amelia, it felt as if every sound had faded, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She moved through the aisles, helping passengers settle in for the evening, but her mind kept returning to the conversation with Ayanna and Michael. The weight of her actions still lingered, but with it was the clear message Ayanna had left her with. This wasn't just about apologizing, it was about confronting her own assumptions and learning from them. As she checked on a passenger's request for tea, Amelia glanced toward Ayanna's row. Ayanna sat with her laptop closed, her fingers folded lightly over it as she looked out the window, her profile illuminated in the soft light. Michael sat beside her, scrolling through his phone, though every so often he would glance at her, their silent communication a testament to their years of partnership. Amelia felt a surge of respect not only for Ayanna's patience but for her grace in handling a situation that could have easily unraveled. Just as she was about to turn away, Michael caught her eye and gave a small nod, gesturing for her to approach. Steeling herself, Amelia walked over, sensing that whatever was about to happen would be a turning point. "Amelia," Michael began, his voice calm but purposeful, "would you mind joining us for a few minutes? We'd like to continue our conversation from earlier." Amelia nodded, feeling her pulse quicken as she took the empty seat across from them. Aware of a few nearby passengers sneaking curious glances, Michael leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table between them, his gaze steady and attentive. "Ayanna and I have been talking about what happened, and we'd like to share a bit more about why we're so committed to addressing these types of encounters." Ayanna met Amelia's eyes, her expression calm but intent. Amelia, I want you to understand that my reaction earlier wasn't just about this one instance. This kind of situation happens far too often. And it's exhausting to repeatedly be put in a position where I'm expected to prove my place or defend my right to be somewhere. Amelia nodded, the reality of Ayana's words settling heavily in her chest. She could see now that the interaction had been just one instance in what must be a long line of similar experiences Ayana had faced. I understand, Amelia replied softly, feeling the prick of shame rise up again. Or at least, I'm beginning to understand. And I know it's not enough to simply apologize and move on. I want to learn from this and make sure I don't make others feel the way I made you feel today. Michael gave a slight nod. His gaze thoughtful. That's a good starting point, Amelia, but understanding bias and actively working to unlearn it requires a deeper commitment. Ayana has had to handle situations like this with grace and patience time and time again. But we all have a responsibility to ensure that people don't have to educate others just to be treated with dignity. Ayana took a deep breath. Her voice softer now, a note of weariness slipping through. It's true, Amelia, every time I find myself in situations like this, I have a choice. I could respond with anger or frustration, which would be justified, but I often find that it only reinforces certain stereotypes. So I choose to stay composed, hoping that it becomes a learning experience. Amelia's throat tightened. But that's not fair, she whispered, a surge of empathy overwhelming her. You shouldn't have to teach others to carry that burden, on top of everything else. Ayana gave a small, sad smile. You're right. It shouldn't be my responsibility, or anyone's responsibility, to educate others while enduring these microaggressions. But it's reality, and I choose to use it as an opportunity when I can. However, she paused, her voice gaining strength. It doesn't absolve others of the responsibility to examine themselves. The plane hit a patch of mild turbulence, and Amelia grasped the armrests, suddenly feeling the weight of everything Ayana had said. She had come face to face with her own unexamined biases, realizing how easily they had shaped her perceptions without her conscious awareness. I need to do more than just reflect on this, don't I? Amelia asked, looking between Michael and Ayana. This needs to change how I treat every passenger, every interaction I have from now on. Ayana nodded. That's the real work. It's about checking your instincts, pausing to ask yourself why you feel the need to question someone, why you might assume something without evidence. It's about breaking down the biases we all carry and ensuring they don't impact others. Michael's gaze softened as he looked at her. I can tell you're serious about this, Amelia. It takes courage to acknowledge mistakes, but it takes real commitment to turn those mistakes into meaningful growth. Amelia nodded, a new determination settling within her. She could feel the eyes of nearby passengers on her, but the embarrassment was fading, replaced by something stronger, a deep, unwavering resolve. Thank you, both of you, she said, her voice steady, for giving me the chance to learn from this. I won't let it go to waste. As she rose, Ayana's voice stopped her. Amelia, one more thing. Amelia turned, feeling the weight of Ayana's gaze. Yes? When you think about bias and assumptions, don't just consider it a part of your job, Ayana said gently. Think of it as part of your life. It's not about being a better flight attendant, it's about being a better person. The words sank in, carrying a depth that Amelia hadn't anticipated. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through her otherwise serious expression. Thank you, Ms. Williams. I'll remember that. Returning to her duties, Amelia felt as if the plane had been filled with a new kind of light. One that illuminated not only her actions but her intentions. She moved through the cabin with purpose, each interaction more thoughtful, her presence more grounded. She noticed the way passengers responded, sensing her shift in demeanor, and she felt a ripple of understanding pass between them. Back in her jump seat during a quiet moment, Amelia closed her eyes, letting the hum of the engines carry her thoughts. She had learned a lesson she hadn't even known she needed, and it felt as if her entire worldview had expanded to include dimensions she had once overlooked. The path forward wouldn't be easy, she knew, but it was a path she was ready to walk, one small, careful step at a time. The plane sailed smoothly through the midnight sky, casting a hush over the cabin that felt different than before, a tension that had softened into something more contemplative. A quiet born of hard truths and deeper understandings. Amelia moved with a new awareness. Each interaction now deliberate, free from the casual certainty she had once relied on. As she walked down the aisle, adjusting blankets and collecting empty glasses, her gaze kept drifting back to Ayanna. Ayanna sat perfectly composed, her presence powerful yet understated, an aura of calm resilience surrounding her. Every so often, Ayanna's gaze would flick to Amelia, and there was a subtle nod in those moments. A silent acknowledgement of what they both knew, that this was no ordinary flight. And these were no ordinary passengers. After completing her tasks, Amelia returned to the galley and found Sarah tidying up. Sarah glanced at her, her expression unreadable. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. Amelia took a breath, her words coming slowly, carefully. I think I'm realizing just how much I have to learn. I was so confident in my judgment, so sure that I could read people. But I never stopped to think that those instincts might be wrong or unfair." Sarah watched her for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. "Awareness is a powerful thing," she replied. "It makes us see things differently. But it's what you choose to do with that awareness that really counts." Amelia nodded, her gaze distant as she took in Sarah's words. The rest of the flight seemed to pass in a series of reflective silences, each interaction shaped by the weight of her newfound understanding. Amelia noticed subtle changes in how she approached passengers, her once casual authority tempered by a newfound humility. Hours passed, and the cabin lights dimmed further as the passengers settled in for the long-haul flight. Ayanna and Michael had resumed their quiet conversation, their heads close together, voices barely audible over the ambient hum of the engines. They spoke in the calm, practiced tones of longtime partners, each word and gesture reflective of years spent navigating life's challenges together. As Amelia watched them, an unexpected surge of admiration filled her. Ayanna had carried herself with an elegance and strength that Amelia had never truly appreciated until now. There was no anger or bitterness in her manner, only a quiet, unbreakable dignity. She handled situations others might have reacted to with frustration or indignation, choosing instead to respond with grace and self-possession. The resilience Ayanna embodied was a lesson in itself. The moment of stillness was interrupted by a mild turbulence, a gentle jostling that rocked the plane. Amelia instinctively went to check on her passengers, moving with practiced ease down the aisle as she ensured everyone was comfortable and secure. When she reached row 2, Ayanna looked up, her gaze meeting Amelia's with a faint smile. "Thank you, Amelia," Ayanna said, her voice soft but strong. "You're doing well." Amelia felt her cheeks flush slightly, but she returned the smile, nodding gratefully. I appreciate that, Ms. Williams. Really. And I'm so sorry again. For everything." Ayanna's smile widened, a hint of warmth softening her features. "We all make mistakes," she replied gently. "What matters is that you're willing to learn from them." Michael looked up then, his eyes meeting Amelia's. "You've shown real courage today, Amelia. Confronting ourselves isn't easy, but you're doing it with honesty. And that matters." Amelia felt a swell of gratitude, both for Ayanna's compassion and for Michael's encouragement. "Thank you, both of you," she said, her voice steady. "I want to do better. And I will." She lingered for a moment, basking in the quiet strength of Ayanna and Michael's presence, before returning to her duties. As she made her way through the cabin, she couldn't help but feel the subtle shift in her approach. No longer was she the overseer of the passenger's experience, she was a part of it. An active participant in their journey. Each face she saw, each small interaction, took on a deeper significance. An opportunity to apply what she was beginning to understand. As the hours passed, the cabin settled into a stillness that felt almost reverent. Most of the passengers had drifted off to sleep, their faces softened in the dim light. But Amelia noticed that Ayanna remained awake, her gaze fixed on the window, watching the stars shimmer outside as if searching for something beyond the glass. Feeling a surge of quiet determination, Amelia approached her once more. "Ms. Williams," she said softly, "can I get you anything? Tea, maybe?" Ayana turned, her expression thoughtful. Actually, tea sounds wonderful, thank you, Amelia. Amelia quickly prepared a cup of herbal tea, bringing it back with careful precision. As she handed it to Ayana, she hesitated, a question forming on her lips. Ms. Williams, if you don't mind me asking, how do you stay so calm? I mean, the way you handled everything earlier, it was remarkable. Ayana took a sip of her tea, her eyes thoughtful. Staying calm doesn't mean I don't feel frustration or hurt, she replied, her tone reflective. It just means I've learned to channel those emotions into something constructive. Anger can be powerful, but I choose not to let it control me. Amelia listened, her heart racing as she absorbed Ayana's words. There was a strength in Ayana that went beyond simple resilience, a strength forged from years of facing down prejudice and bias, of asserting her place in spaces where she wasn't always welcome. Thank you for sharing that with me, Amelia said quietly. I hope I can learn to be as strong as you. Ayana's gaze softened. Strength isn't always about staying composed, Amelia. It's about the willingness to grow, to face our flaws and challenge them. And from what I've seen tonight, you're stronger than you realize. Amelia felt a swell of emotion rise in her chest, her resolve hardening with every word. She wasn't the same flight attendant who had boarded this plane hours earlier. She was different now. Changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. And as she looked out at the endless night sky beyond the cabin windows, she felt a quiet certainty that this journey, the one that had begun in row 2, with an assumption and an apology, was only the beginning. She returned to her duties with a renewed sense of purpose, each task a testament to her commitment to change. The rest of the flight passed in a tranquil stillness, punctuated only by the occasional soft murmurs and the gentle rhythm of the engines. By the time the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Amelia's heart was calm, her mind focused. She had been given a gift that night, an opportunity to confront her own biases and to grow beyond them. And as she prepared for landing, she felt, for the first time, a sense of peace in her heart, a peace born from the knowledge that, while she had made mistakes, she was ready to learn from them. As they touched down, the plane gliding smoothly onto the runway, Amelia glanced one last time at Ayana and Michael, feeling a warmth in their shared look. They had granted her grace and understanding, and in return, she had found a resolve to carry their lessons forward, to become the kind of person who saw others with true respect and empathy. With each quiet step through the cabin, she felt herself walking toward that future, her path illuminated by the resilience and strength she had witnessed and hoped to one day embody. The first light of dawn was beginning to creep through the windows, casting a soft, golden glow across the cabin as the plane made its way over the last stretch of land before reaching the California coast. Amelia moved down the aisle, a new sense of clarity guiding her every step. Her earlier nervousness had quieted, replaced by a profound, steady calm. In first class, the passengers were slowly waking, stretching, and adjusting their seats. A few were speaking in hushed tones, their voices barely carrying over the gentle hum of the engines. As Amelia passed Ayana and Michael's row, she felt a pull to stop and check on them, to offer one final gesture of service before the journey ended. Good morning, Ms. Williams. Mr. Lee, she said softly. Is there anything you'd like before we begin our descent? Ayana looked up, a hint of surprise softening her expression. Just some water, please. Thank you, Amelia. Michael nodded in agreement. Water sounds perfect. Amelia brought back 2 glasses of chilled water, placing them carefully on their tray tables. But as she prepared to step away, Michael spoke up, his tone warm but serious. Amelia, do you have a moment? She paused, nodding, and took the seat across from them once again, sensing that there was still something left unsaid. The early light filtering into the cabin cast a soft glow on Ayana and Michael, highlighting their calm, quiet confidence, a confidence Amelia admired deeply. Amelia, Michael began, his gaze thoughtful. We've watched how you handled everything last night, and Ayana and I both agree you've shown an incredible openness to learning. That's not something everyone is willing to do. Amelia felt her cheeks warm, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. Thank you, Mr. Lee, and Ms. Williams. Thank you too. I know I made a mistake. But I want to change. I want to make sure this never happens again. Ayanna leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful and kind. What I saw last night was someone who genuinely wants to grow. Amelia, that's rare. You have the power to take this experience and use it to make a difference not just for yourself but for others. Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of Ayanna's words settle in her chest. I do want that. I've been thinking about how many times I might have made assumptions like this before. I want to take this lesson and bring it to my work and my life. Ayanna and Michael exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. Then Ayanna turned back to her, her voice calm but firm. Amelia, change starts with awareness. It's not enough to recognize one incident and move on. Real change means questioning our assumptions, again and again, until they no longer define how we see the world. Michael nodded in agreement. It's about challenging those instinctual judgments, taking a step back, and allowing yourself to see people as they are, rather than through the lens of bias. Amelia's gaze dropped for a moment as she absorbed their words. She felt a hum of determination, a new sense of purpose coursing through her veins. I want to be that person, she said quietly, her voice steady. Someone who doesn't judge on appearances. Someone who treats every passenger and every person with the respect they deserve. Michael's expression softened, his tone sincere. That's all anyone could ask. Amelia, and if there's anything I've learned in my years of managing people, it's that those who are willing to learn are the ones who end up making the biggest impact. Ayanna's gaze held Amelia's, her eyes filled with a warmth that was almost maternal. I believe in second chances, Amelia, and I believe that you'll take this experience and turn it into something meaningful. Amelia's throat tightened with emotion. Thank you, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. You have no idea how much this means to me. Ayanna reached across the table, placing a gentle hand over Amelia's. You've already shown that you're capable of change. Now, keep going. Continue questioning. Continue learning. And don't be afraid to share what you've learned with others. That's how we create change. One person at a time. Amelia nodded, the weight of the moment filling her with a sense of gratitude she hadn't expected. This wasn't just a lesson for her, it was a chance to become the kind of person she had always hoped to be. Someone who saw others with empathy and understanding. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Amelia took a deep breath, the morning light illuminating the cabin with a renewed warmth. She stood, smiling softly at Ayanna and Michael as she resumed her duties. Every task she completed now felt different, as if each small act was part of a greater purpose, an opportunity to put her newfound understanding into action. The final announcement came over the intercom, instructing the passengers to fasten their seatbelts and prepare for landing. Amelia moved through the cabin with a new confidence, checking each seatbelt and tray table with a calm attentiveness. Her actions were no longer just routine, they were intentional, part of her commitment to approach every moment with respect and dignity. As the wheels touched down smoothly on the San Francisco runway, the hum of the engines quieted, and Amelia felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This flight, she knew, had been transformative, not just a journey across miles, but a journey through her own assumptions, one that had brought her closer to understanding the person she wanted to become. When the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began to gather their belongings, Amelia took her position at the front of the plane, thanking each person as they passed. She exchanged smiles with many, her interactions genuine, her gratitude visible. Finally, Ayanna and Michael reached her at the door. Ayanna paused, her expression softening as she met Amelia's gaze one last time. Thank you for everything, Amelia, she said, her voice warm. I look forward to seeing how you grow from this. Amelia nodded, her voice steady. Thank you, Ms. Williams. I won't forget this. Michael offered a warm handshake. Take care, Amelia, and remember, growth isn't a destination, it's a journey. As Ayanna and Michael stepped into the jet bridge, Amelia watched them go, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. She had been given a gift, a lesson she hadn't expected but one she desperately needed. And as she gathered her things, ready to disembark, she knew with certainty that this flight, this chance encounter, would stay with her, guiding her long after the plane had landed. With the passengers gone and the cabin empty, Amelia took a moment to stand alone, letting the quiet fill her. The person who had boarded that plane was not the person standing here now. She had changed, grown, and she was ready to carry that growth with her, one step at a time. As she exited the plane into the San Francisco terminal, she was already looking ahead, seeing the world with new eyes. And with every step, she walked with purpose, ready to bring her newfound understanding into every part of her life. The soft chime of the cabin speakers brought Amelia back to the present as the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco International Airport. The local time is 7:45 a.m., and the temperature is a mild 65 degrees. On behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us. And we hope you have a wonderful day in the Bay Area. Passengers stirred, reaching for bags and murmuring their thanks as they prepared to disembark. Amelia stood by the front exit, offering her usual farewell to each person. But today, her words carried a warmth she hadn't felt before. She wasn't just saying goodbye, she was acknowledging each passenger, seeing them as individuals rather than just faces passing by. As Ayanna and Michael reached her, she straightened, meeting their eyes with a smile that felt deeper than a mere expression. It was a smile of gratitude, of understanding. She had come to realize that this flight had become more than just a trip across the country. It was a journey of transformation, one that would continue long after she left the plane. Ayanna extended her hand, her grip warm and steady. Thank you, Amelia. I hope this experience becomes the foundation for something meaningful in your life. Amelia nodded, her heart full. It already has. Ms. Williams, I'm grateful to you both for helping me see things more clearly. I won't forget what I learned here. Michael shook her hand with a firm nod. Remember, Amelia, growth doesn't end here. Keep challenging yourself, and keep listening. That's how real change happens. With one last nod, Ayanna and Michael stepped into the jet bridge, disappearing into the flow of travelers moving through the terminal. Amelia watched them go, feeling the weight of her experience settle over her like a well-worn cloak, a newfound understanding she could carry forward, woven with humility and the promise of change. The cabin was empty now, and as Amelia walked through first class, she found herself pausing at row 2. The seat where Ayanna had sat seemed different somehow, imbued with a significance that went beyond its luxury leather and polished fixtures. She reached out, touching the edge of the seat, feeling a surge of respect for the woman who had sat there, who had managed to teach her more in one night than she'd learned in years of training. Just then, Sarah appeared beside her, offering a gentle smile. It's amazing, isn't it? She said, her tone soft. How much we can learn from people we've only just met. Amelia turned to her, nodding. I never realized how much my own assumptions affected the way I saw people, she said, her voice filled with conviction. But I understand now. This job isn't just about service, it's about seeing people as they are, without my own biases clouding that view. Sarah nodded, the warmth of pride in her eyes. That's a lesson some people never learn, Amelia, but you've taken it to heart. And that's what matters. They finished their post-flight duties in silence, each lost in her own thoughts, each step a quiet reflection of the journey they had just experienced. When they exited the plane and walked through the empty terminal, the early morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting a gentle glow that felt like a blessing. The airport was slowly coming to life around them, travelers streaming through with purpose, each on their own path, carrying their own stories. As they made their way toward the exit, Amelia turned to Sarah, a new sense of resolve clear in her voice. I want to share what I learned here. I want our team to understand how much our actions matter, how a single interaction can change someone's day, maybe even their life. Sarah smiled, nodding in understanding. Then lead the way. Amelia, I think your story is one worth sharing. Amelia took a deep breath, the prospect of turning this lesson into a teaching moment both daunting and thrilling. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she felt ready. As she walked into the brightness of the San Francisco morning, she felt lighter, as if the weight of her past assumptions had been lifted, leaving her with a clearer view of the world and her place within it. In the days that followed, Amelia made good on her promise. At the next crew training, She shared her story with honesty and vulnerability, recounting her journey with Ayanna and Michael, the lesson of humility, and the powerful impact of seeing others without bias. Her words resonated with her colleagues, and together, they began to discuss ways to challenge their own assumptions, to hold each other accountable, and to create an atmosphere of respect and empathy within their work. The airline soon took notice of Amelia's initiative, recognizing her commitment to fostering a culture of awareness and inclusion. Her story became part of the training curriculum, a reminder to every new flight attendant that their role was not just about service but about dignity, empathy, and growth. Months later, Amelia was called in to speak with the airline's director of customer experience. He commended her for her efforts, inviting her to help lead a new program focused on customer relations and bias training, a position Amelia accepted with gratitude and humility, knowing that her journey was far from over. And every time she stepped onto a plane, Amelia carried with her the memory of Ayanna Williams and Michael Lee, two passengers who had seen her not just as a flight attendant, but as a person capable of growth and transformation. They had left her with a profound understanding that her work wasn't only about guiding others safely through the sky, but about guiding herself and others toward a deeper, more compassionate understanding of one another. As the years passed, Amelia's story continued to ripple through the airline. Her colleagues spoke of it, passengers felt it in the warmth of her service, and new flight attendants learned it in their training. Amelia had become a quiet force for change, her life a testament to the power of a single encounter, a single lesson, and the courage to learn from it. In those quiet moments before a flight, when the cabin was empty and the lights dimmed, Amelia would sometimes walk through first class, pausing at row 2, remembering the journey that had begun there. And as she looked out over the rows of seats, she would smile, knowing that she was ready to welcome each passenger not just as another face in a crowd, but as someone deserving of her respect and her best. And with every flight, Amelia Martin's journey of growth continued, high above the clouds, carrying her forward into a brighter, more understanding world.